Okay, today we're going to be installing a set of our curved extended radius arms. You can see here you have the driver and passenger arm set, the driver being on our left hand side. You can tell it is the driver by the way it is bent. If I tip it up here, you can see that the curve goes outward. That would be the driver's side. This reinforcement plate would go to the outside of the Bronco. Also, it should come with mounting hardware and also hardware to get it started. You will have 4 1/2" by 1.5" National Course grade 8 bolts. I'm sorry, 8 of those, and then you'll have 4 of the 1/2 by 2.5 and 4 of the 1/2 by 3.5. Also mounting hardware for your coil cups. So we're going to go ahead and show you guys how to install these today using our axle jig. And
first step,
we'll get started.
Installing the new radius arms, you'll want to clean the actual wedge that is welded to the housing, top and bottom. You'll want to chip off and wire brush any rust that is on there. You'll also want to do the same for the inside of the cap here to remove any debris that can cause installation issues.
You are going to be reusing your factory cap in this application.
The next step, you'll take your new polyurethane 2-degree C bushings. If you look on them, they have written or stamped into the mold rear bottom and front bottom. So front bottom would go obviously on the front of the differential here, same as the front cover, and the rear bottom would go on the back on the bottom. Now, prior to installing these, you'll have some energy suspension lube that'll come with it. You'll want to wipe it on inside and on the outside of these bushings to give it plenty of lube, so when it all goes together, it'll slide together nicely and not get hung up in any way. So as you can see, we've kind of assembled the bushings on here to show you the placement of them. You'll see that there's lube on them on the outside, and we've put it on the inside. You'll see that the front radius arm cap has the upper threaded hole for the coil cup on top. Make sure you have it like that. We'll go ahead and throw one of these new arms up into place and install a couple of the 1/2" by 3.5 bolts.
As you're doing this, you'll just hand tighten everything to begin with, get everything lined up in place. And the reason that we're using the longer bolts first is due to the gap that is created. So you'll start with the longer 1/2" bolts, and then you'll tighten them down and go to a shorter bolt. So if you put a 1/2 by 3.5 here, you'll do it on the opposite side at the bottom. You can tighten it slightly and then put a 1/2 by 2.5 on as well on this one, and then the opposite on the bottom. And you can use flat washers, as Phil's doing here, for spacers in order to draw it up tight. Just make sure you don't tighten it up too much to where you're galling the threads that are in the extended arm.
So you go ahead and get your bolt started. You can go ahead and impact opposite corners together until you can get to the next series of bolt length, which will be
the 1/2 by 1.5.
1/2 by 1.5. So draw these down until they come to a stop. These bolts only allow you to go in so far into this block, and then they come to a stop. They won't pass all the way through. And then you can take your shorter bolt, get it started on the opposite 2 corners. And then you can pull out your longer bolts that you use to get started. The other thing I forgot to mention, it would probably be best if you got some anti-seize and lube these bolts so that as they go into the threaded holes here, they don't gall the threads at all. The anti-seize will help with that.
Okay, and now that we're at the 1/2 by 1.5, which is the final bolt you'll use, we'll go ahead and put a lock washer on it and get it started. Just make sure you have enough threads started prior to running it with the impact. And now we'll run one on the opposite corner on the bottom.
So now that these are close enough, you can go ahead and take out your other 2 starter bolts and add a lock washer and reinstall them, because those will be your final bolts that you use. Now as you tighten this cap down, you want to do like a crisscross pattern to evenly torque that cap down, otherwise it binds up. So you do a little bit each way. So that it'll evenly torque down.
It's very similar to torquing a V8. So if you got done, let's say, and you had installed your new C bushings and your extended arms, and your Bronco had a lean, let's say, to the driver or passenger side, most of the time that is due to the fact that your C bushings had shifted during installation. Possibly you over tightened one side and a C bushing got off. So most of the time, if you do have that happen, it's because you didn't use enough of the energy suspension lube, or while you were tightening them down, you ran one side too quickly without evenly torquing those 4 bolts. So you can see here you have a fresh new extended arm, curved, all fully fabricated arm, and you know, these would come to you powder coated black with all the hardware necessary to mount them. Okay, so here you can see the extended curved radius arms installed on Lonnie's Bronco. We've also installed part number 6990, the heavy duty radius arm brackets. The extended arms mount approximately 12 inches rearward of the factory location, setting your geometry back to factory specs. We do recommend a 2-degree polyurethane bushing with these. They come as a pair, powder coated, with all the hardware necessary to mount them. And also there's plates welded on already to the arms for our dual shocks, hoop shock application. Make sure after installing the arms, especially on the cap where the C bushings are, that you drive it for approximately 100 miles, double check everything, make sure nothing has loosened, and retighten anything as needed.